growing up in church, depending on the age, disposition, and perceived musical ability of the preacher. Before he moved into the introduction of his sermon on any given Sunday, the preacher used to raise his voice, leading the congregation in what he called his prayer hymn. There were a couple of standards that he chose from. At least in my experience, more often than not, it was the old hymn that says, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see." This old hymn, written by John Newton, communicates to us originally Newton's own personal conversion narrative, which is full of its own problems that I encourage you to research on your own should you have the interest. This hymn, despite its origins, has morphed from a problematic personal narrative to a universal message. This message that proclaims that regardless of the sins one has committed, forgiveness and redemption are possible, not due to a person's own willpower, but because of God's amazing grace at work in our lives. However, while God's grace to save is immediately effective in our lives, this hymn may fail to adequately portray the Christian life, and that the life of the Christian is not always one of immediate or total change in behavior and habits. That is to say, once a person accepts Jesus Christ and acknowledges Him as Savior, that person is indeed at that instant saved. While a change certainly takes place in their life, and a wonderful change comes over them, not everything about that person is changed in that instant. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a survey real quick. Who of us in here, after being saved, has never said a cuss word? Who of us in here, after being saved, has never lied? Who of us in here, after being saved, has done nothing wrong? Well, I don't see any hands up in the sanctuary today, so my point is proven. While God is certainly omnipotent and can work suddenly and immediately, remember that God is also sovereign. And God can work however God wants to work, and can do so in a variety of ways. So while God can certainly work instantly, as we have seen time and time again, both in this series and in the Gospel of Mark, as we see that word as it relates to Christ's power over and over again, that word immediately, while God can work instantly, God can also work progressively. God can also work in stages. But let's keep it real on a Sunday morning. Working in stages is not sexy work. Working in stages is not cute. Working in stages is not easy, especially in the world in which we live. You see, everything is supposed to be done in an instant. Everything is supposed to be fast. Everything is supposed to happen immediately. Information can be attained at an instant with a simple search on our smart devices. Appointments can be made on our calendars with a simple voice command. Movies and entertainment can be streamed immediately on a broken Roku stick. And any type of food you want can be delivered within a matter of minutes by DoorDash. Speaking of foods that previously took a while to make are now instant. We have instant coffee, instant rice, and instant grits. These instant luxuries around us have misled some of us into erroneously thinking that everything in life is to be done right now. We have to have success right now. We have to have the top job right now. We have to get the terminal degree now. We have to have the right perfect fit summer body now. We have to have the perfect new boo now. We have to have the right car, the right money, the right house now. Beloved, I hate to break it to you on a Sunday morning, but sometimes you're not going to get everything you want now. And the same is true about our walk with Christ. Not all real, lasting spiritual change comes in our life at an instant. Just because God doesn't do it instantly or immediately for you doesn't mean either that He's any less powerful. And it doesn't mean either that you have more problems than anybody else. All it means is that you are a work in progress. Can I take another survey in the sanctuary today? I want to have a witness in the sanctuary on a Sunday morning who can testify that I am not what I ought to be. But thank God I'm not what I used to be. Is anybody in the sanctuary who can testify I'm not where I should be? But thank God I'm not where I was. Do I have a witness who can say, I don't have it all the way together, but thank God I don't have it hanging all the way out either. Y'all know I'm not usually this type of preacher, but if you're not too mean, just look over at your neighbor and tell them, pardon my progress. Oh yeah. Pardon my progress if you don't think I am what I should be. Pardon my progress if you don't think I always do what I should do. Pardon my progress if you don't think I always say what I'm supposed to say. Pardon my progress if you don't think I dress the way that I'm supposed to dress. Pardon my progress if you don't think I act the way that I'm supposed to act. Oh, won't you please, ma'am, please, sir, pardon my progress this Sunday morning. Before we shout too hard off of that. Just because we might be a work in progress, that doesn't mean we get a license to do whatever we want to do. If we say we're a work in progress, that means we ought to be doing just that. We ought to be progressing, not regressing. To progress means that while I may not be perfect tomorrow, I should be better today than I was yesterday. So the question becomes then, how do we progress faithfully? And I believe today that the answer to that question lies in our text, beloved, where we meet a blind brother at Bethsaida, whose miracle from Jesus is not immediate or instantaneous, but his miracle is gradual and progressive. Those scholars and commentators have suggested over the centuries that the reason why this blind brother at Bethsaida doesn't receive his miracle immediately like others do in Mark, it must be due to a lack of faith. But I humbly submit today to you that that is not the case at all, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, this blind man at Bethsaida helps us to see what true faith in Jesus really is, as he trusts Jesus, as he sticks it out with Jesus throughout his progressive, gradual process toward a miracle that occurs by stages. Because you see, it's easy to believe Jesus when Jesus does it instantly. It's easy to believe Jesus when Jesus does it immediately. But it's harder to trust him. It's harder to keep the faith when he does it progressively. It's harder to stay in the process when it goes by stages. It's easier to have a miracle done passively to you than to do as this blind brother at Bethsaida does and participate in his own progress of his own miracle. So the first thing I believe that this blind man at Bethsaida can teach us is that if we are to progress faithfully, we must first concede our place. concede our place. The text says in verse 22, they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. What faith this had to take this blind brother at Bethsaida? Remember, he's blind. That means he can't see. And he is being led by what the text translates as some people. Now, Mark is not clear here concerning who these some people are. We don't know if this blind brother knows who these people are. We don't know if they're his family or his friends. We don't know. They're just some people who knew about his blindness, knew of his struggle, and wanted to bring him to Jesus just so that they could witness a spectacle. We don't know who these people were who brought this blind brother to Jesus, but what we do know is that this blind man was progressively moving toward Jesus. What we do know is that this means that this blind man left wherever he was. He conceded his place despite not being able to see or to guide himself, and he went to where he trusted Jesus to be. Notice here that even this happens in stages. He is first brought by who the text identifies as what we have just lifted up as some people who knew where Jesus would be. Now logically, we can infer that this blind brother did not know where Jesus was. Even if he had been brought to Bethsaida, it can be safely assumed that he wasn't from there. Since he was blind, that meant he had never seen Jesus for himself. Which meant he had to rely on others who had seen Jesus for their own selves. That's something we have to acknowledge in our relationship to Jesus, that none of us got where we are by ourselves. Not one of us met Jesus out of our own accord. Somebody had to introduce him to us. And I don't know who it was for you. It may have been a praying parent, a praying mother, a praying grandmother. It may have been a friend. It may have been the preacher. It may have been the stranger on the street. It may have even been a preacher or somebody you were watching on TV, but somebody else had to introduce him to you. Amen. Look at the text. Once they got him to Jesus, remember this is all happening in stages. Remember this is all progressive. He is secondly taken by Jesus by the hand and led out of village. Whether it was by some people or whether it was by Jesus himself, the principle remains this blind brother at Bethsaida first had to concede his place. Although he could not see or guide himself, he had to trust others' knowledge of Jesus, and he had to trust Jesus himself. Yes. And in both cases, he had to leave where he was and go wherever he was led. Beloved, my apologies, but the hard truth, the fact of the matter is, you can never progress if you stay where you are. You cannot get better if you keep on doing the same old thing you've always done. You can never get your miracle. You can never get your breakthrough. You can never get to the next level if you don't concede your place, if you don't get up off of your blessed assurance and get up and get to Jesus by whatever means necessary. This blind brother at Bethsaida couldn't see, but guess what? He went anyhow. He didn't have to have all the pieces for it to make sense. And guess what? You will never have all the pieces, and it will never make sense for you either. And guess what else? You can't get those pieces by staying where you are, because if you could, you would have already. So that means, like this blind brother at Bethsaida, you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to charge some unknown territory. You're going to have to pray like you've never prayed before. And you can do that on the prayer line every day during Lent at 12 o'clock. Amen. You got to fast like you've never fasted before. You've got to give like you've never given before. You've got to seek God like you've never sought God before. You're going to have to go where you've never gone. You're going to have to do what you've never done if you want to get something that you never had. You've not only got to concede your place, secondly, if you are to progress faithfully, you've got to consider your position. Consider your position. The text says in verse 23, he took the blind man by the hand, led him out of the village, and when he had put saliva on his eyes, laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Can you see anything?" The man looked up at Jesus and said, "I can see people, but they look like trees walking." And what's interesting to me here, church family, is not really what Jesus is doing to this man. We've seen Jesus, even in this series, invade folks' personal space and disregard social norms. You've seen before how Jesus gets down into folks' problems in a very visceral way, and he touches the deepest parts of who we are. So that's not really what's interesting to me today, because although this miracle is unlike the others in terms of it being progressive and not instant, we've already seen Jesus spit and lay hands on other folks. What's interesting to me today is this man's position, both his physical and his spiritual position. We can deduce from the text that this man is likely sick. After Jesus puts spit on his eyes and lays his hands on him, the text records that this man looks up. That's a word already just right there. Remember that your deliverance is always in the details. Perhaps the reason why some of us can't progress in our lives is because we haven't taken the time to sit before Jesus. Some of us are too busy still trying to stand up, still trying to do it ourselves. Some of us think that we're the doctor, that we can self-diagnose and self-medicate, trying to drink ginger ale for every ailment that we have, when the problem requires the expertise of the great physician. What we really need to do is what Grandmama said, and we need to get somewhere and sit down. We need to stop thinking that we're the doctor, and we need to realize that we're the patient. Stop thinking that we're on equal terms with Jesus and let him do what we can't do for ourselves. What else is interesting here to me, church family, here is not only his physical position, it's his spiritual position. After Jesus spits on him and lays his hands on him, Jesus asks him, "Can you see anything?" Notice that man's response. Verse 24 says he looks up. He answers Jesus' question. He says, "I can see people, but they look like trees walking." Beloved, I don't think that this is as much as a statement about Jesus' power or the perceived lack thereof. But I think this is a statement more about this man's consideration of his own position. You see, this man was willing and courageous enough to be honest about where he was. Beloved, as you can see, I wear glasses. I've worn glasses for the majority of my life. And although I don't like to think that my many pairs of glasses are fashionable, they are more so to serve a function. Well, you see, without my glasses, brothers and sisters, I can't see a lick. I have 425/20 vision. So the eye doctor has been a consistent person in my life. I remember when I was 4 years old, my mother took me to the eye doctor for the first time. Since I hadn't learned to read yet, the eye doctor projected shapes and animals and other objects on the wall for me to say what they were based off of what I saw. Well, because I didn't know any better, I thought I would get in trouble with the eye doctor if I couldn't tell him what the shapes were because I couldn't see. My 4-year-old self tried to whisper and ask my mama what those shapes on the wall were. And of course, my mother wouldn't tell me what they were. Because she knew that if I wasn't honest about what I could not see, that it wouldn't hurt her or the doctor. It would only hurt me in the long run. Come here, let me bless somebody. This question Jesus asked of this man, can you see anything, is not about Jesus' own ability to recover the sight of the blind, because we know he can do that. We've seen him do it before here in Mark. This is a question about the blind brother at Bethsaida's own ability, not so much to see actual objects, but his own ability to see accurately where he is and be able to name that truthfully and courageously. And instead of acting like everything is well, instead of acting like we can see people when we can actually only see people who look like trees, you see, pretending isn't going to hurt Jesus. It isn't going to hurt the people who brought you. It isn't going to hurt the people around you. Pretending that you can see when you can't see is only going to hurt you in the long run. As my friend Reverend Michael Gaines says about this passage, folks will be a whole lot better. And church folks in particular will be a whole lot better. If, like this blind man, we could admit to Jesus that while we can see something, we can't see clearly. It would be a whole lot better if we could admit that while we're better, that we're still blurred. Though I'm better, I still struggle. Though I'm better, I still mess up. And though I'm better, I still cuss sometimes. James Baldwin said, and as I've repeated time and time again from this pulpit, you cannot fix what you are not willing to face. And acting like you're a wholesome saint when you are a shown-up sinner isn't a testimony, it's a lie. And a testimony can only come if we consider our position and allow God to truly work on us, even if we don't get it all right the first time, and even if it requires a second touch. So, beloved, I've got to go now. We've got to welcome some new members into our church family. We've got to get to the Lord's table. But if we are to progress faithfully, if we are to progress forward, we've not only got to concede our place. We've not only got to consider our position, but thirdly and finally, we've got to contemplate his person. Contemplate his person. See, after that blind man at Bethsaida is honest with Jesus, after he admits that while he's better, he's still blurry, the text says in verse 25, then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again. And he, the blind man, looked intensely. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. And Jesus sent him away to his home, saying, do not even go into the village. Beloved, as we conclude this series today entitled, Can You Keep a Secret? Miracles, Mystery, and Messiah in Mark, we've been considering these miracle and mystery passages here in the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus heals someone and then tells them not to say anything about it. And this will be the last time that Jesus does this in Mark. So the placement of this passage is interesting. Because here in the Gospel of Mark, as you will see in Mark chapter 8, if you just look a few verses earlier, this passage here of the healing of the blind man at Bethsaida follows Jesus feeding the 4,000. Warning his disciples then afterward against the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. They misunderstood what he said to be about the loaves and the fishes he just multiplied. They didn't understand that he was talking about who he was over and against the corruption of the Pharisees. And Jesus, realizing that these disciples of him, even after the miracle of the 4,000, feeding the 4,000 with fishes and loaves of bread, they still didn't understand who he was. So he asked them in verse 18, he says, do you have eyes and still fail to see. Then here in this passage today which follows, we see Jesus asking a similar question to this blind man. He says, "Can you see anything?" After that, the man admits that he's better, but he's still blurry. Then Jesus lays his hands again. Then something interesting happens. The man looks intently. And notice what, or really who, this blind brother at Bethsaida is looking at the second time. He's not looking at other people. He's not looking at what he perceived the first time to be other people who look like trees walking around. The text records that this time he's looking intently at Jesus. And once Jesus laid his hands on him, and once that man looked at Jesus intently and looked to nowhere or nobody else, the Bible then says that that man saw everything clearly. I'm in my seat now, but that's a word for somebody today. If you are to progress faithfully, you've got to concede your place. You've got to consider your position, but most of all, you've got to contemplate his person. And once you do that, once you look at Jesus, once you take your eyes off of what you can't see, once you take your eyes off of other people, once you take your eyes off of your problems, once you take your eyes off of what you don't have, once you take your eyes off of your situation, and you look up to Jesus, you'll find that everything will become clear to you. You've got to do what this Bible says, and you've got to keep your eyes lifted up unto the hills, from whence cometh your help, because all of your help comes from the Lord. You've got to do what this Bible says, and you've got to keep your eyes looking upward unto Jesus, the author and the finisher, the pioneer and the perfecter of your most holy faith. You've got to turn your eyes upon Jesus and look full in his wonderful face. And then you will find that the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and of his grace. And since it's first Sunday, his glory and his grace doesn't come from what he does, but his glory and his grace comes from who he is. Because you see, my sisters and my brothers, Jesus is not just a miracle worker, but Jesus is the Messiah. He didn't come just to heal your body, he came to save your soul. And if you don't know him, let me tell you who he is. Isaiah called his name. He said he's wonderful, Counselor, he's the mighty God, the everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. But if you keep on reading Isaiah, the prophet with the eyes of faith could see over into the future that surely he would bear our grief and carry our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, he was smitten by God and afflicted. But with the eyes of faith, Isaiah saw that Jesus was wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, worship.